I wanted to answer Raj. I love this, that he sent me a couple of questions, which we can refer to here at the end here in a few minutes. But also just a little bit of a good news. And I don't know who these are from, but it really encouraged me. One was, please let Kit know that God is using this to really help me pray again. And they said, like, really pray again, so I love that because like all of us pray. I mean, we know to pray, and probably if we've been doing this for a little while, we feel bad if we don't pray. And then sometimes we get into, well, how long should I pray? Or, what should I pray about? And it can just become, kind of like a relationship that has lost its fire. And so when I hear that, someone saying, man, it's helping me to really pray again, not like I think the brother or the sister, stopped praying, but maybe there was a lack of intimacy there, and that's what this whole thing is about. And then the second one said, oh, this is pretty cool. Someone reaching out to his friend for years got an audio clip from this friend about a sermon on Elisha on the exact same day as this disciple was reading about Elisha, which was day 13. And so, one of the things that we're looking for on this journey is evidence that God is active in our daily affairs, all the details of our lives, and we start to open our eyes and see them. And a lot of this in my process is I ask God for signs. I love to ask him, hey, show me something today. Show me Jesus in a new way today. Spirit, speak to me today. I want to hear from you today. Make it obvious today. And so, if you're studying Elijah on day 13 and all of a sudden, somebody that you've been reaching out to hits you up with the same exact sermon on the same day, hopefully that went into your journaling there, that's a fingerprint, that God is involved in the details. So very encouraged by that. And if you could keep that coming, I would love it if, as this thing goes on, that we're able to, I wish we could hear from everybody, but we've got too big a group. But if you do have a good news, man, shoot it to Raj, or if you have a question, man, the questions are great. That's what makes this thing really deep. And so please keep those coming, and I'll do my best if I can. So anyway, so we'll
one more, Kit, if I can interrupt with one more good news.
Oh, yeah. We can spend good news as long as you want.
Yeah, so one of the sisters had been studying towards her PhD, and she had been praying that her assessment can go well. And during this time that we have been praying, she has received her confirmation that, beginning of May, she, will get her doctorate, and it's something that she has been praying, the family has been praying about. And, I forgot that we have another region that the sister is actually a part of planting this church in one of the cities in Rustenburg. We have two families that are there studying the Bible with a couple of people there. And before the lockdown, we have been having really great Sunday service attendances. We even have students from one of the universities who is ready to be baptized and is from the same town. And so we are going to be figuring out how to get to him. But that's Rustenburg. So if you can please pray for Rustenburg. And the sister is Magren Seitswe, who from May will be referred to as Dr. Magren Seitswe. That's awesome.
Man, that's exciting. And, I want to say this, there's no, in my estimation, and this does go to one of the questions, I think, at the end, I don't see things as big miracles and little miracles, like judging kind of like, man, well, that person, of course, that was a miracle, but my little thing, and either everything's a miracle or nothing is. God is either actively involved in everything or nothing at all. And so it's a matter of, can we open our eyes and see him is the key. And I
Yep.
want to remind you that this process, this book, it came out of me trying to figure out how to reconnect with a God that I had gotten estranged from. And God never left me. But when I went on a run and I went away, um, I felt like he was far away,
Mhm.
but he never left me. As a matter of fact, he stalked me. The faster I ran, he was faster than me. As high as I tried to get, he was above me. And as low as I got in my deepest despair, he was beneath me. And I just couldn't get away. If I backed up, he was behind me, and he held me. And what I realized is all those years when I was just being foolish, um, he wasn't far from me. I just couldn't feel him, and I just couldn't see him. But that didn't mean that he wasn't there. And I really have really gotten a new heart around people that are really struggling, and people that even leave and go away, that feel like God has left them,
Mhm.
or feel like that they, have gone too far and can't come back. This process for me was, how do I get my heart back? Not even back. How do I get a heart that I never even had all those years in the ministry, where things became very legalistic for me? I don't know if anybody struggles with that, where you've got boxes that you need to check. And if you're doing all of them well, you feel close to God. But when you're not doing well, you don't feel close to God. And so that was the process that I put together. Each week that I want to kind of reinforce and review the process, and I want you to kind of just look at the areas that you're struggling with in this process. And I'm going to ask you just to let yesterday go, and don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow's got enough worries of its own. And just focus on today, just right here, right now. Not what he did or didn't do for you yesterday, or what he might or might not do for you tomorrow. Just today is the day of salvation. It's the only one we ever have. And so these steps help me day to day to maintain and build an intimacy with God. There was a great question a couple weeks ago from one of your family there, and it was like, how is this different from, kind of the prosperity gospel? Claim it, name it, and claim it, which is a great question, because so much of the focus of this is coming up with the things that you really, really want God to do for you, and then searching and journaling and speaking and trying to manifest these things. And I know there's a lot of people maybe that came out of churches that sounded like that. But I wanted to encourage you, the whole journey, this 40-day journey, is to develop a closer intimacy with God. Um, I found, and I did a little Facebook Live thing on this just a few minutes ago, and I was talking about intimacy with God. And without meaning to, over the years, I had transferred a lot of things in my relationship with my father onto God, which is very understandable. It's almost hard to get away from doing that. And I love my dad. I miss him. He died when I was young. And we had a very rocky relationship. He was my hero. And then I feared him. And then I hated him. And then I missed him. So it was a very complex journey for a little boy. But as a little boy, my life was very insecure because I didn't want my dad to be mad at me. He had quite a temper. And so I was always trying to stay out of trouble. I was trying not to make him mad. And so when I did things that I shouldn't do, I hid them. So I developed a secret life. And all of this kept me from having the kind of intimacy with my dad that I yearned for, that we all yearn for in our earthly parents. And they do the best they can. My dad did the best he could, but he had an addiction problem, alcoholism. And that's what killed him when I was in college. So years later, I was in the full-time ministry, leading large churches, traveling around, preaching at a lot of y'all's churches. And I was, one of the guys that was helping lead a very large church and even oversee some other churches. But I still didn't have an intimacy with God to where we were close, regardless of how I was doing. And I started noticing that in all my relationships, in my marriage. Marriage can become a relationship that just loses its fire and you kind of do the same things all the time. It's the same routines. Maybe you have a date night, but you always do the same things. It's just we get into routine month after month, year after year, and all of a sudden you're in a 15, 20, 25-year marriage, and it's not what you dreamed that it could be. And that's what I found in my life. So this process, it probably the biggest miracle of my life came in my marriage. And because it was all but over. I mean, it was on life support. And this was after years of following Jesus. And it was the biggest heartache of my life because it was almost over. And I had already written this, and I started to apply this to my marriage. And these things are what helped me, hit your knees first thing every morning. So years ago, probably, 8 years ago, I started getting on my knees first thing in the morning. And I'm talking about first thing, roll out of the bed onto the knees. And then it became a habit, and it became a lifestyle. And for years now, my wife will tell you, I just roll over on my knees, and I don't spend a long time in prayer. But what that did for me is it helped me to turn my eyes to God before I looked or thought about anything else. My first waking moments were putting my eyes on God. And that began to be a very important practice for me. Writing out the things that I really, really desired in my relationship with God, whether it be character changes, relationship changes, things about my job, helping me support my family, things about my kids when I was scared, the things they're going through, anything and everything, my health, someone else's health, churches. I began to write them instead of just think about them in prayer. And so my prayer life became very deliberate. And I want to encourage you, if you're struggling with that step, the more specific, the better. And the prayers that, I'll just keep sharing from my life. This latest one, I'm always doing one of these. But this last round, and this is after 7 years ago when I published it, I was going through some things with my son, and he just was struggling, not with things he shouldn't be doing, but he was going through some depression, and he had never experienced that, some real clinical depression. And my son and I are very, very close. And so this became a new tool. And I decided that I was going to do a 40 days of prayer just for him. Like all of my impossible prayers are all about my son, and everything that I'm really praying for him to be and to have and to become and to remember while he's going through this very dark time. And so I wrote down 10 things that I believe him to be, and that I was just praying every day. I visualize him being these things: joyful, clear, crisp, happy, compassionate, deep, so connected to God, very close in his romantic relationship, very sharp and focused in his work, very soft-hearted when it comes to people suffering, laughing loud like I know he is. And I created the image of my son that I was praying for God to reveal. And then I took a picture of it and I sent it to my son, and I said, I'm going to do this all for you. And it was on Easter Sunday, this past Easter in April 12th or whatever it was. And we began this journey together. And then I did 10 things that I wanted God to do in my heart for my character, to be kind of man that I need to be. And so this has been a very personal journey. This one has been different. And it scared me, because here's the thought that I had. When I started, I said, what if I pour my heart and my soul into this and it doesn't work? What if after 40 days, he's still struggling? And sometimes he was getting kind of dark. I mean, it gets scary for a parent. We have a young person that's starting to have some very dark thoughts, but it was that fear that told me that's exactly what I need to put on here. That's what this is all about, is putting down things that scare you a little bit. Should you put things on there about people that you'd like to study with and baptize? Sure, you should do that. Should you put things on there about your character, that you need help with, your sinful nature? Absolutely. Should you put things on there about your financial situation and your need of a job, or through this crisis, this virus, absolutely you should, or your health. But the times when I'm really, the things that I wrestle with the most are the things that I wake up with in the morning. That first thing that hits your heart, grabs you, makes you a little afraid. It usually has uncertainty and fear. We're afraid. That's what I want you to put down. The things that scare you a little bit, not just the things, that you want for other people. That's noble, do that too. But this one has been very personal for me. So when I write down the things that I want, they become very real. And what you're going to find over this 40 days is your brain is going to begin to change. I love studying brain science. And unfortunately, there's a divide between spiritual things and scientific things. And now it's starting to come a little closer together, but it's science and faith have been at war for a long, long time. And it makes no sense to me, because God created our brain in such a way that it serves us to allow us to be like him. And so we've got this amazing organ, but it has been programmed by your experiences, who you were raised by, the things you saw when you were young, your friendships, everything you've ever watched, it's recorded. Everything you've ever listened to, everything you've ever touched, smelled, heard, tasted, felt, it's all recorded away. All your habits are deeply ingrained in this brain that's been doing life for 20, 30, 40, 60, 70 years. And so every year, these habits and patterns get more firmly entrenched. And it's very hard to see, because over time, your brain is always there. It's always talking to you. But a lot of times we don't notice the habits that drive our spiritual life. We know we should reach out to people, so we do. We know we should go to church, and we do. We know we should have quiet times, we do. We know we should have good, tight, discipling relationships, so we do. We know that we need to confess and, really just clean our heart out when we mess up, and we do. So we've got all these, but they can just become habits, and we can lose the fire behind it in that relationship. So in the same way that to repair my relationship with my wife, which was my biggest heart's desire, and this was several years ago, God has helped me fall madly in love with my wife. I didn't think it was possible. I really didn't think it was possible. And to go from a marriage that was almost over to we fell in love more than we did when we first met and we first started dating. And I'm talking in every way, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually intimate. And I had never experienced that in 56 years. I had never experienced that. And God did for me what my heart wanted. And so did it take 40 days? No, it took longer. Was it just an instantaneous healing? Mm-mm. I mean, we put in the work. We had to start putting really special times together. We had to really talk, because we had stopped doing that. I had to make her feel loved and adored and safe and beautiful. And so I became very intentional in the way that I was loving her. And I wanted her to feel fully loved. And I'd never, ever done that for anybody in my life. And so I was ready, and God did for me what I could not do for myself. And for me, this is what did that, is it helped me to stay focused on what I wanted, and so that I could see God. And when I started to every day, as I poured over the things that I was praying for in my marriage, miracles began to happen, because I started seeing things in her that I'd been missing. Things that used to bug me now became cute and kind of funny, things that used to turn into an argument, all of a sudden were just gentle, and we could talk. And I started recognizing things about her that I'd never seen. And I started remembering things about her that I'd noticed in the beginning. And so this earthly relationship became real. And once I'd experienced that, oh my gosh, there was nothing that seemed impossible. And so writing your prayers down is powerful, because they become real. Reviewing them every day is very important, because you're getting your brain to now get involved in this process, and you're going to make your brain let go of some things that it's learned for a long, long time. Action steps toward what you're praying for is huge. Okay. Just like God made a step for your brother who did the Elijah sermon, you know, that connection. When we take steps toward our prayers, man, it's not just praying that my marriage gets better, but it's taking that day's prayer and saying, what can I do today that would draw me closer to that miracle? That became a huge part of my process. Witnessing and reviewing the previous day's events. You guys are all through mine now because y'all are a miracle that has showed up in my life. And so I get to say thank you, but this is what connected us through prayer. And so the steps, I want to encourage you to just for 40 days in a row, do that. I think today's day 14, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct? Something like that. So you've been doing this about 2 weeks. Right before we do this, not a lesson, but just the discussion question for this week, I want to encourage anybody that is struggling on this, that you're 14 days in, and we live in an age where we want everything to be fast. Okay, we want it quick. I mean, that's how the world lives now, man. Amazon will bring it to me up here. You know, technology allows us to get things instantly. And I don't know about you, but we can become very discouraged if we don't get what we want, especially when we get our hopes up. Okay, this whole project is about getting your hopes up, allowing yourself to get into position to get your heart broken. Now, think about how scary that is. See, if you've been around for a little while, life, it comes at us and we have storms. People come and they leave. Sometimes marriages end. People are born, people pass. People get sick that we love. People do things that hurt relationships, and our heart can become very hard. And it's because we're protecting ourselves from hurting like that again. And I know in my relationship with God, when I went through my big struggle at 40, I hardened my heart because it hurt so much. I couldn't preach, and I loved to preach. I wasn't able to see. I wasn't part of my church family, and that hurt so bad. So in those years that followed, I guarded my heart because I didn't want to hurt again, you know, because I had really experienced my ultimate failure. And now I've learned to live life like gambling big, like just all in. God, I really, really want you to do this, and then chase after it with everything I've got. And I don't mind a broken heart. You know, one of the questions at the end was, have you had God not answer your prayers? And how did you respond? Great question. And I'd say, yeah, there's a ton of stuff that I've asked for that I haven't found. Some of it, I feel like I just haven't found it yet. And then other answers from God sometimes are like, that's not going to be best for you, son. Because a lot of times I might put something on my impossible prayer list, and it's not something that's going to help me. And it's nothing that's bad. Maybe God wants to see me wrestle for something. You know, Jacob wrestled with that angel and wrestled all night long with a bona fide angel, and the angel could not break free. And so finally he said, let me go. And Jacob said, I'm not going to let go until you bless me. And then he had to touch his hip. You know, he knocked his hip out of socket to let him go. But then he got the blessing he was seeking. And he got his name changed to Israel. And a nation now had a name. And that name means struggles with God and overcomes. And so this process, wherever you are today, don't judge yourself. Just accept where you are today. And if you're in the middle of a struggle, man, it's a good struggle. It's a good fight. And we're not going to get everything we ask for, nor should we. But I think God loves it when we struggle righteously with him. And so what I try to do in these stories is to find examples of God wrestling, men and women wrestling with God over their heartaches and watching God intervene, and then going out and applying that to, you know, what we do. This was a really good one too. Nowadays, is God working in the natural realm through people, or in the spiritual realm like he did with Jesus and the apostles? Were the miraculous signs and wonders, healing the blind, healing the blind, the lame walking, raising people from the dead, etc., was that not meant for that era to prove that Jesus was indeed the Messiah? If not, how come we cannot perform similar miracles? I mean, these are great questions. I mean, we all ask these questions. We see these miracles in the Bible, and then we look at our lives and we say, what's changed? We know the Bible says that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He does not change like we do. We know that he's all powerful. We know that he's all present. We know that he's all knowing. We know that he's all loving. He is love. So I would say, I think he works based on the amount of faith we have. Now, does he, if someone has extreme faith, perfect, pure faith, can they raise the dead? I think God can do anything. Sometimes he doesn't raise the dead. Sometimes he doesn't. It's not what we desperately want is not the way that things are going to be according to his grand scheme. There are times in our lives, and nobody wants to be Job. Nobody's saying, God, help me be like Job. Job's suffering and him going through the most amazing human suffering wasn't for Job. It was for people, even us today, to look at Job's suffering and to realize that he was still faithful to God. God could have done a lot of that, but he didn't. Job had a purpose. Think about what Paul had to go through. Paul saw amazing miracles, but he went through incredible suffering. And now we look at Paul's life and it encourages us to hang on. But I guarantee you, somebody on the line has experienced miracle healings. I'm talking about either personally or you've witnessed or known people that have experienced just divine intervention, miraculous healings. I believe in that. I believe that there probably have been instances of people being raised from the dead in the times since Jesus. I think that he does. I think he's at work all the time. But I also believe this. My ceiling of faith is whatever I believe is possible. And then whatever I believe is impossible, there we go. That's my cap. So if we've never seen those kind of miracles, perhaps we do not believe that they're possible anymore. It doesn't mean they're impossible. We're praying to the same God. He's not trapped in space and time. There's no yesterday. There's no tomorrow. He just is. I am that I am. And so I don't have an answer to those questions. I believe in a God that there's nothing impossible for him. There's nothing too hard for him. And I believe that we limit ourselves based on what we've seen. So today, just as we kind of, begin to wrap up, you guys just finished, I think, day 14. So we're on the week 2 discussion, which is found on page 44. And you remember last week we talked about, do you want to get well? And Jesus asked a very obvious question to a guy who had been paralyzed for 38 years. And he found him and he said, do you want to get well? And the guy was, you would have thought that the guy would have said, yes, please, right now. But he didn't. He started making excuses. Somebody always gets to the water in front of me. That guy over there is faster than I am. Man, I've been here. He just went into his habitual complaining and excuse making and blaming, and Jesus healed him still. He didn't have the faith. Jesus healed him still. But here's the question he asked us. Do you want to get well? And then we talked about, what does someone who wants to get well look like? They're willing to go to any length. There's nothing they're not willing to do. They're willing to do whatever the doctor prescribes because they want to get well. But if you don't want to get well, he just acted like he wanted to get well, well, then he's just going to be sick again. So this one plays on the last one. This one's in Matthew chapter 20 and beginning in verse 29. It says, as Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. 2 blind men were sitting by the roadside, and when they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. The crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet, but they shouted all the louder, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. Jesus stopped and called them. What do you want me to do for you? He asked. Lord, they answered, we want our sight. Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes. Immediately they received their sight and they followed him. So we have yet another example in the Bible of blindness. And blindness is a theme in the Bible. And there's quite a number of miraculous healings that someone referred to in that question where Jesus gives sight to the blind. And I happen to believe that he wanted a number of those miracles all over the Gospels so that we see that vision is so incredibly important. We all see things the way we see things. Okay, none of us has the exact same lens through which we see things. We see things based on our experiences, based on our history, based on our victories, based on our failures and defeats, based on things that we have seen and things that we've never seen. And that affects the way we view the world. Two different people with the same eyeballs can look at a situation and have two totally different situations. The Pharisees, all they saw was the law, and they missed Jesus. Jesus did miraculous healings, and the religious could not even see it. They got all jacked up because he was healing on the Sabbath. But then other people saw the miracles of Jesus, and they were overwhelmed, and they went and followed him and died for him. Two different people seeing things through different lenses. Over 40 days, this whole project is built to help us to start to see Jesus. I would love for you to start praying that every day. Just very simply write it down. Father, and I call him Abba. I love it, Daddy. I want to see Jesus today. Show him to me in a new way. And then just let it go and watch what he does. He'll start to show you things that you haven't seen before. And so in the same way that Jesus touches the blind, he can touch our eyes. Saul, scales fell from his eyes. And instead of seeing Jesus as a cult leader that needed to be destroyed, all of a sudden he saw Jesus as the Messiah that he had been persecuting. And it was all because his eyesight changed. If you remember in the Old Testament, Elisha is in a very desperate situation. His partner, Gehazi, is looking at the enemy surrounding them on all sides. They're done. There's no hope. And then Elisha says, Lord, let him see. And all of a sudden his eyes were open and he looked, and there were chariots of fire that were surrounding the enemies of God. And they were two eyes, same types of eyeballs. One was seeing through faith, and one was seeing just through human eyes, physical. Just like that, he could see the spiritual. I believe that God still gives eyesight to the blind. The Pharisees, Jesus said, if you admitted that you were blind, I could make you see. But because you claim you can see, I can't do anything for you. And so in this process, I think we can come to him and say, help me see. I want to see you. I don't want to just believe. I don't want to just pray. I don't want to just, kind of do things to help me feel closer to you or to be forgiven. I want to see you, man. And he never denied anybody a request like that, ever. Try to find one. But here's the question. He wants to know, what do you want me to do for you? So I want to, again, encourage you to be very bold and specific in what you're asking for. And realize this, if you get involved in this, and I'm not cheapening it, but if you think of it as a game, this is a game of hide and seek. All right. I think God has a very young heart. That's why he's got such a great, beautiful, big heart for children. And children were drawn to Jesus because I think Jesus' heart was very young. It was childlike. It was pure. He loved to play, and he loves for us to play. And I think as a little boy, a little girl asking their daddy, can I please have some bread? Jesus said, he's not going to give you a snake. But I think sometimes he wants to play a little bit of hide and seek. He loves when we chase after him and when we go on a treasure hunt. So if I pray in the morning, something very close to my heart, or if I just say, give me a sign today, like Gideon asked for a sign, God didn't get mad at him, gave him a sign. And so if I ask for signs today, what I'm asking for is I want to see. So when he says, what do you want me to do for you? We say, I want to see you. Like when we were young Christians, we felt him. And maybe we saw him as much as we could. And then as we got longer and longer and longer in Christ, you would think our eyesight gets clearer and clearer and clearer. And those that have been around the longest, I've been doing this, 31, 32 years, whatever it is, you would think my eyesight would be perfect now and I'd see God in absolutely everything. But it's not always like that. And so today I say, I want to see you. Please show me. And so at the end of this, imagine if I hit my knees first thing in the morning and say, Abba, and then I go and I present my request to him and I journal my heart. And then I say, please show me yourself today. And I go out and live my day, whatever that looks like. And then I'm carefully watching so I can write down evidence and say, I see you. I saw when that guy called me today, I see you, whatever it is. Now I'm doing what the Israelites did. We're chronicling the history of God working in their lives. And guess what that does to the brain? Now the brain understands what it's supposed to be looking for. And after 40 days in a row of this, the brain has now been trained to look for God. And now you can be the person that looks at a situation and says, oh my gosh, I see God all over that. When somebody else might look at the same situation and say, God doesn't love us. He's not even present anymore. And it's just different eyes. So do you want to get well? Yeah. What do you want me to do for you? I want to see. And God says, he touched his eyes. Jesus gets very, very personal. All right. He's going to touch you where it hurts. And so why did he put the finger in the ear of the man who couldn't hear? Why did he touch the tongue of the man who couldn't speak? And why does he put his hands into the eyes of the man who can't see? Because his touch is all we need. He's very, very close to us. And so today, I want him to touch my eyes. Now imagine if I develop a lifestyle of, let me see. Let me see. I want to see you. Show me yourself today. Where are you at? I'm looking for you. It's just like, I think it warms his heart. I think he gets excited. And now we'll start, once we see and he touches us, boom, and the scales are gone. Now I begin to realize that he's never said no to a prayer. Okay, so in a beautiful way, as the brother or sister says, have you ever seen God not answer your prayer? I think maybe I should say, no, I've never seen that. Because he answers every single one, but he answers it in a way that we might not ever imagine. Let's say I'm praying for courage. He's going to allow me probably to find some pretty terrifying situations. And we'll be like, I'm praying for courage. Why don't you answer my prayer? And he's like, this is how I give you courage. I got to give you something that's pretty scary for you to see the courage that I'm putting in your heart. Help me with my son, man. He's really struggling. And then all of a sudden things get worse. And I'm tempted to say, why didn't you answer my prayer? And he says, no, I'm letting you see his suffering more so that it can change your heart and that you can go and be intimately involved in the healing I'm about to give your son. So I don't see that he ever withholds the answer. He gives it to us in the perfect way. And we got to understand this, in the perfect time. All right. So this is a 40 days of prayer, but hey, it takes as long as it takes. I'm glad I didn't ask God to heal my marriage like right away. It wouldn't have even been good for me if he'd have done that, because I wouldn't have learned anything. And, it could leave just as fast as it comes. But he did it over a period of 2 or 3 years until all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, he's answered the biggest prayer of my life. And so now, once I've found one miracle, now I start getting hooked on miracles, like hungry for the next miracle. And that's the beauty of this thing. So let's see. I think I covered pretty much the things I was trying to cover. Just recap steps. Please journal and then share good news. All right. As God gets involved in these things that you're wrestling with, please shoot them into Raj or Themba or Rap or whoever it is that you need to give them to, because we're going to develop a spiritual momentum that's going to take us to a new place. So I'm going to throw it back to you guys, and we can go wherever you want to go for the last 10 minutes.